Ever feel like you're bombarded with self-help stuff, but nothing really sticks?
Yeah, it's like information overload.
Totally. So today we're doing a deep dive into a classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, Covey's book. A classic for a reason, for sure.
Right. It's about getting to the core of like how we can actually make those changes last.
It's not just another to-do list. It's deeper than that.
So where do we even begin with this deep dive?
Well, Covey starts with paradigms and how those shape everything.
Paradigms. It
Yeah.
always sounds a bit, abstract.
It's like, imagine this picture. Some people see a young woman, others see an old one.
Yeah.
Same image, totally different ways of seeing it.
Okay, I kind of get it. So it's like those lenses we wear that shape how we see the world.
Exactly. And sometimes we need to adjust those lenses to really understand what we're looking at.
So it's not just about changing what we do, it's about changing how we see.
You got it. And that's a huge part of what he calls the character ethic.
Character ethic. Sounds a little, I don't know, old school.
Maybe, but it's about building on a strong foundation. Like you wouldn't build a skyscraper on sand, right?
That's true. You need a solid base.
Exactly. Covey's saying true effectiveness comes from within, integrity, fairness, all those things. That's the bedrock.
So substance over style. Got it. Did Covey have any aha moments that led him to this?
He tells this story about trying to change his son's behavior, using all the right techniques, but nothing was working.
Oh, been there.
Right. And then he realized he was focused on the symptoms, not the root cause, which was his son's character.
That's deep. It makes you think about those times you try to hack your way to productivity without actually, changing your habits.
And speaking of habits, Covey talks about this thing called the PPC balance.
The what?
PPC balance. It's like, imagine a goose that lays golden eggs.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Most of us are so focused on the golden eggs, the results, we forget about taking care of the goose itself.
Wow. That's actually really insightful. I feel like I'm always chasing those golden eggs.
Right. But if you don't take care of the goose, you'll end up with no eggs at all. Covey uses the example of this restaurant owner who waters down his famous clam chowder to save money.
Oh no, that's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Short-term gain, long-term pain. That's neglecting the goose.
So how do we make sure we're feeding the goose, so to speak, in our own lives?
That's where the 7 habits come in. And it starts with habit 1. Be proactive.
Be proactive. Sounds simple enough. Isn't that just taking initiative?
It's more than that. It's about recognizing you have a choice in how you respond to things. Like instead of saying, I have to do this report,
You say.
I choose to focus on this report so I can, whatever your goal is. It's subtle, but it changes your whole mindset.
Wow, that's actually really powerful.
It is. You go from feeling like you're at the mercy of your to-do list to being in control.
I like that. Okay, so be proactive. What's next?
Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
So setting
It's
goals.
bigger than that. Covey talks about visualizing your own funeral.
Whoa, hold on, my own funeral. That's a bit dark.
It sounds morbid, but it's about thinking about what you want people to say about you, what kind of legacy you want to leave behind.
Okay, I see. It's about your why.
Exactly. With that clarity, you can make choices that are in line with the person you want to be.
That's powerful stuff. So we've got our why. We're being proactive. This is already giving me a lot to think about.
And we're just getting started.
Okay, so we're being proactive. We're thinking about the end in mind. Where does habit 3 fit into all of this?
So that's where we get into the nitty-gritty of actually making things happen. Put first things first.
Time management. Ugh. I feel like I've tried everything and I'm still drowning in to-dos.
It's not just about managing time, it's about managing ourselves, really. Covey says we need to ask ourselves, are you focusing on what's truly important or just what's screaming for our attention at any given moment?
Yeah, that's always the struggle, right? The urgent versus the important.
Exactly. He has this grid, right, with urgency on one axis and importance on the other. 4 quadrants.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
So quadrant 1 is crisis mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Urgent and important, those things we all have to deal with. But Covey says effective people, they live more in quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2. Those are the things that are important but not urgent, the stuff that always gets pushed aside when things get busy.
You got it. Things like long-term planning, relationship building, taking care of your health, all that good stuff.
The stuff that actually matters in the grand scheme of things but is so easy to put off.
Exactly. But by prioritizing quadrant 2, you're actually preventing a lot of those quadrant 1 fires before they even start.
That makes so much sense. It's like choosing to exercise and eat healthy today to prevent health problems down the line. But how do you actually do that? How do you carve out that time when you're already feeling pulled in a million directions?
Well, Covey recommends weekly planning. Instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day, zoom out. Look at your week through the lens of your bigger goals.
Weekly planning. Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be helpful. More manageable than trying to, like, map out your entire life.
Right. And if those urgent things do pop up, you'll be better equipped to handle them without completely derailing your important long-term goals.
Okay, this is already making me rethink my entire schedule. So we're prioritizing, but what about delegation? Any tips on how to, not become a micromanaging maniac? Because I've definitely been there.
Well, for sure. And Covey addresses this head on. He talks about gopher delegation versus stewardship delegation. Have you heard of this?
Go for delegate. Oh my gosh, that's totally me sometimes. Like, go for this, go for that. Basically doing it myself, but slower.
That's it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
And it never really leads to the best results, does it? Just more work for you and not much ownership from the other person. Stewardship delegation, though, that's about empowering others to really own the outcome.
So it's more about giving people autonomy, trusting them to do their best work.
Exactly. You're clear about the results you want to see, but you let go of the how. It definitely requires more trust up front, but it pays off big time in the long run.
This is making me realize I need to seriously up my delegation game.
Mm.
It's not about just dumping tasks on people. It's about, like, creating leaders. Okay, so we're prioritizing, we're delegating effectively. But what about when it comes to, like, actually interacting with others?
Ah, yes. Relationships. Those can make or break our effectiveness, for sure. And that takes us to habit 4. Think win-win.
Okay, win-win. That sounds good in theory, but sometimes it feels like it's me versus them, especially in a competitive work environment. How do you get out of that win-lose trap?
Well, Covey says win-win isn't about being a pushover. It's about recognizing that, in most situations, we need each other to succeed. A win for you only works long-term if it's also a win for the other person.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually put that into practice, especially when you're dealing with someone who's, like, dead set on winning at all costs?
It's not always easy, for sure. But it starts with your own mindset.
Yeah.
Covey talks about having an abundance mentality, basically the belief that there's enough to go around for everyone.
So instead of seeing someone else's success as my loss, I can celebrate it and look for ways to, like, collaborate and create even more success together.
Exactly. It's a total shift from scarcity to abundance. And honestly, that kind of energy can be pretty contagious.
I love that. It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, but realistically, not everyone is going to jump on board the win-win train, right? What about those times when someone is just determined to make it a competition?
Oh, absolutely. Covey acknowledges that.
Yeah.
Not every interaction is going to be a win-win Hallmark movie moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best you can do is agree to disagree, or just walk away from a situation that's become unhealthy.
Sometimes no deal is better than a bad deal, right?
Exactly. Even in those tough situations, you can still choose to focus on what you can control, your own actions and reactions. Covey calls this your circle of influence.
So it's about staying true to your values and not getting sucked into the drama, even when other people are playing the win-lose game.
You got it. And that actually leads us perfectly into habit 5.
All right, habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I feel like this is one of those things that's easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to, think you're listening when you're really just waiting for your turn to talk.
Oh my gosh, yes. Or like filtering everything through your own experiences.
Exactly. Covey calls that autobiographical listening, and most of us are guilty of it.
Autobiographical listening.
Yeah, I can see that. So how do we break out of that habit and actually, really listen?
It's about shifting from wanting to be understood to genuinely trying to understand the other person. Covey calls it empathic listening.
Empathy. Okay, so putting yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. It takes practice, for sure, especially when you're in the middle of a disagreement or feeling emotional.
Totally. When you're fired up about something, it's hard to see things from the other person's perspective.
It is. But Covey breaks empathic listening down into these stages. Like, at the most basic level, there's mimicking content, which, can feel a little robotic at first. Right, like you're just parroting back what they said.
Right, but then it's about taking it a step further and rephrasing content, putting what they said into your own words to show you're really trying to grasp their meaning.
Okay, so showing them you're not just hearing the words, but actually processing them. What's next?
Then you get into reflecting feeling. So not just focusing on the words themselves, but also acknowledging the other person's emotional state. Saying things like, you sound really frustrated, or I can see how that would be hurtful.
That's so important, though. Sometimes just feeling heard and validated emotionally can completely change the whole tone of a conversation.
It really can. And then there's the highest level of empathic listening, where you're both rephrasing the content and reflecting feeling.
Yeah.
You're showing a really deep level of understanding.
That's got to be powerful to experience, to feel truly heard and understood on that level. No wonder communication breakdowns are such a common problem.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about how often we jump to solutions before we've really even taken the time to understand the problem. Empathic listening lets you slow down, build that trust, and then you can really start to collaborate effectively.
Which brings us to habit 6, synergize. I'm sensing a theme here.
Right. They all build on each other. And synergy is all about the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay, so it's like teamwork, but on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about valuing differences, being open to new ideas, and then coming up with something that's even better than what you could have achieved on your own.
I love that. It reminds me of those brainstorming sessions where like everyone's bouncing ideas off each other and suddenly you have this breakthrough moment.
Yes. And Covey would say that synergy doesn't just happen magically, though. It takes a foundation of trust, respect, and open communication, all those things we've been talking about.
Right, you can't just throw a bunch of people in a room and expect synergy to magically occur. It takes those other habits to create the right environment for it.
Exactly. And then finally, we get to habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Okay, so this is the like self-care habit. Time to relax and recharge.
It's definitely part of it, but it's more than just taking a vacation. Covey talks about renewing yourself in 4 key areas: physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional.
So it's about taking care of yourself holistically, making sure you're firing on all cylinders.
Exactly. Physically, it's things like eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep.
Mhm.
Spiritually, it's connecting with your values, finding that sense of purpose.
Yeah, if you're running on fumes physically and you're feeling spiritually depleted, it's hard to be effective in any area of your life.
Totally. And then there's the mental dimension. Covey talks about being a lifelong learner, constantly expanding your mind, whether it's reading, learning new skills, having those stimulating conversations.
Always be learning. I like it.
And then lastly, the social emotional dimension, nurturing your relationships, being empathetic, contributing to something larger than yourself.
All those things that make life richer and more meaningful, it's about connection, right?
Exactly. And Covey would say that neglecting any one of these dimensions ultimately impacts all the others. It's all connected.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. This deep dive into the 7 habits has been incredible. Any final thoughts?
Just that it's not about being perfect. It's about making those conscious choices day after day to show up as the best version of yourself.
Love that. And sometimes it's those small, consistent choices that end up making the biggest difference in the long run. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive.